Welcome back to the channel, guys. Josh here, and today I wanted to talk to you about if I was 20 all over again, what would I do differently? I'm of the view that it's really important to reflect back on your past decisions and see where the actions you were responsible for went right and wrong, and what things you could have done differently so that going forward into the future, you can do them better. And I mean, really, as a financial advisor, the purpose of this whole channel is about investing and thinking about our careers and trying to maximize our life. And one of the best ways we can really do that is think about where did I mess up in the past and how can I not make those mistakes again. I've had a lot of people on the channel or in the comments say things like, hey, I aspire to be like you one day, or have a business like you've started, or to be a financial advisor like you. And I mean, that's very flattering, but the reality is that my early 20s were a very tumultuous time. It was a time of a lot of exploration and trying to understand, at a time of being very lost and trying to find myself. And today I think back, if I was 20 again, what would I do differently? And I think the first thing that comes to mind by a long shot is this idea of humility. And that might sound like pretty cliche, but I want to get to a deeper point here. And I think that as people, I mean, I was born in 1995. When we were raised in the 2000s, and maybe you can relate, we were all taught that you can do whatever you want in life. You know, you have the education and the power and the prestige, and you have the privilege, and you were born into a great world with infinite resources. You can put a dent in the universe. You can build a massive company. You can make a huge difference. You can change the world. All these big messages, right? This is what we're told in school. But the reality for me, and I was talking about this with a friend, it seems like that's a very hubristic way to try to raise somebody or to try to bring someone up into the world, to set their expectations so high to say that they're someone who could change the entire world and they can make a massive impact. So for me, I was raised in that, and I came out of high school, and when I was in high school, actually, I was very obsessed with business and investing, and I was always coming up with ideas, and I had some businesses that were making a little bit of money, and I'd started investing in the stock market. And for me, I was in a circle of people where I knew more about business and investing than anybody I ever met. Like in my direct circle of friends around my age, I knew more about business than all of them. And to me, I got this sense of self-importance. Not only can I change the world and put a dent in the universe, I know so much about business and I know a lot about stocks, and I'm gonna come out of high school and I'm gonna be this world-changing investment guy. I'm gonna be this big financial personality. Like, this is what was going through my mind. And you know, you're young and you have all this ambition and you wanna make a massive impact. And it didn't help at all that, you know, I got featured in things like Business Insider for their 20 under 20 in finance. And this just fed that whole ego. And essentially what happened is you get out into the real world and you realize that it's very hard, and that maybe all these things you've been told about making this immediate impact is a little more far-fetched than you might think. And a lot of people who do something very admirable, like go and get an entry-level job where they have to grind and they don't necessarily love that job, but they have to put in the hours so that one day they can move on to better things. That's super admirable. But now we have an entire generation of people who think that that's very depressing. They're depressed because they've taken a job where they don't feel like they're changing the world or having some massive impact. When in reality, sure, there are gonna be people who make a dent in the universe just by variance, right? By randomness, by stumbling into new opportunities or getting lucky. The idea that you're going to have some massive impact right away, or if you don't, you're some failure, that's really harmful, right? And for me, I had this kind of complex in my mind where I thought I could be someone that was up here, but my actions and my strengths and my weaknesses really showed someone down here. And what that meant was, in my mind, I had to signal to other people to fill that difference. I had to signal as if I was more successful than I was. So it led me to do really stupid things, like take the money I was making and buy nice watches or expensive cars or nice clothing, or taking massive vacations, or going out to the club and buying bottles and all these stupid things where I could have taken that money and invested it and been more productive with it. So if I could go back to being 20 again, I would approach my career and my life and my impact with a way different lens. I would think of it more like this. I'm very imperfect. I have a lot of weaknesses. I do have some strengths, but I've been born into a good situation, but not a perfect one. It's not as if I'm some amazing, incredible person by default. I'm going to try to do as best as I can to play the cards I've been dealt and create a good outcome with that. But I'm not gonna set some massive expectation to myself where if I don't change the world, I see myself as a failure. And at first, in my mind, I thought, well, have really high standards for yourself. Have really high standards, because what that means is that you're going to strive for them, and maybe you'll miss, but that ambition, even if it makes you angry, it's still going to motivate you to do better. But that was completely false, because by holding this idea that if I wasn't a massive success, then I was a total failure, that didn't end up motivating me. It actually ended up destroying my motivation. It actually ended up making me tyrannize myself instead of like negotiating with myself. And I ended up living a life that had a lot of tension and a lot of anger and a lot of frustration. And I thought that that was motivation. In reality, it was actually making me less productive. It was making me a worse version of myself. So the first thing would be humility. Another thing I would have done really differently is I would spend more of my time looking forward instead of looking back. And what I mean by this is I chose a career that had a good track record of being good to people in the past. And what I mean by that is finance technically was something that was very popular and was very beneficial to the people who worked in that industry in the 50s and 60s and 80s and 90s and even the early 2000s. But the reality is I wasn't really thinking about where the world was going and focusing my time and my energy on trying to get ahead of it and be part of the future. Rather, I was thinking about where have people had a good lifestyle and gotten wealthy and made money in the past. And by focusing on the past, I got myself into potentially a line of work that was not so focused on the future, that wasn't as progressive as something that I would have liked to do. And this isn't to say I don't enjoy finance. I absolutely love finance. But the idea is maybe I would have approached it in a higher leverage way. Instead of thinking of it as I'm going to be the next Warren Buffett, because that's what success was the generation before, I would have thought maybe more along the lines of I love finance, I love investing, but maybe I should focus on where the future of those things are going. Maybe software, maybe trying to develop software or become a computer programmer that creates better investors or helps financial advisors or something like that. I might have also thought more about, creating content and creating media, because it was clear to me back in the day that there was a ton of opportunity in the future to create your own media channel. For instance, I tried to start a YouTube channel back in 2017 and I made like 8 videos and I found out it was just too hard to stay consistent. So I kind of gave up because I thought there was nothing really there. And then 4 years later, I look back and some of my videos had like 30,000 views. I'm like, what the heck, you idiot? Like, why didn't you just keep doing that? So there was a part of me in my 20s that thought, look backwards and try to see who's been more successful. But what it really takes, and kind of this element of being a visionary, is to think forward. Where is the world going? So in 2021, where is the world going? Well, we think about things like artificial intelligence and we think about things like software. Why wouldn't we be focusing on where the future is going instead of looking backwards? So if I could start over at 20 again, I would think about my passion in a higher leverage way. How can I maybe use content or use software and pursue my passion that way instead of doing what had led people to success in the past? And now all this talking about finance leads me to another thing that I did very wrong in my 20s, which is it was always finance, finance, finance. That's what I was excited about. That was like the first idea I ever got really obsessed with and went all in on. For me, one of the interesting things about my adolescence was that I was a really good volleyball player. That was the sport that I was the best at. And the reason I got better at it than everybody else that I played with and against for a long period of time is because I was putting in way more work and I was a single-minded focus on that one thing. And I learned early in life, well, if I go all in on one thing, I can kind of be an outlier. Where my friends would go to practice and they'd play games, I would go to practice and I'd get a meal plan and I'd get a personal coach and I'd do vertical training. And there's all these things I would do on my own accord to actually make myself better and more elite than my competitors and the people on my team. That sort of thing. I would go all in. And so I saw, okay, well, if I became the best at this one thing by going all in, I can become the best at finance by going all in. So I essentially spent all my time reading about finance, thinking about finance, looking at the stock market, looking at different companies, trying to learn every single thing I could about wealth and investing. But what I did wrong is that I wasn't multidisciplinary. I was so focused on just one specific thing. And what that means is that I was, an inch wide but a mile deep. I didn't know very much about very many things, but I knew a ton about one thing. In reality, if I wanted to be smarter and more interesting and someone that would actually be able to provide value to other people, I would have become multidisciplinary. I would have studied more about philosophy or studied about history or studied computer program or studied science, right? Getting interested in such a wide variety of things that each of those things would complement each other, and that I would, instead of being, an inch wide and a mile deep, I could be a mile wide and a mile deep. Not as if that's easy to do, but all that being said, you understand the point. And the way I would illustrate this is you look at athletes, right? I was an athlete and I got good at that sport because I went all in on it. But the funny thing is that there's now research that shows that if you want your kid to be a great athlete, you want to raise a good athlete, you actually want to put them into many different sports. As they're a kid, you don't want them to focus on one. So, and that's funny because I look at my picture and the kids who played soccer and hockey and basketball and football and volleyball, they actually ended up doing better than me in the late stages of our career when they decided to go all in on one sport. They became better than I did because they were multidisciplinary. They knew more than just one single thing. So anyways, guys, if I were to go back to being 20 and I do it all over again, the first thing I would do is I would approach it with a little more humility. I would think about it as, hey, I'm not perfect, but I'm gonna do the absolute best I can, and I think this would have made me more productive. I would spend more time trying to look forward and see where the world's going instead of looking back. And lastly, I think it would have been valuable for me to dive into just more things. Instead of becoming so single-mindedly focused on one thing, I might have gotten better at that one thing, finance, by getting better at many different other things as well. So becoming multidisciplinary. So anyways, guys, those are the things that if I were to look back, I think that if I would implement those things when I was 20, it would be a lot smoother sailing. I'd probably be a lot further ahead by now. But anyways, that's what life's about. It's about finding out those experiences, seeing what we can learn from, and feeling the good and feeling the bad, and seeing how in the future we can progress to being a better version of ourselves. So anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. If you got any value whatsoever about learning how stupid I was when I was 20, make sure to hit that like button below, hit subscribe, and turn on post notifications for more videos just like this one every single week. Until next time.